Hello, welcome to another episode of the Practice Forward podcast. My name is Owen Bush. I'll be your host today. Today we are joined by Spencer Luckey. Spencer is a Yale-trained architect, and he's the president of Luckey Climbers, a design-build firm specializing in sculptural climbing structures that blend art, architecture, and play. After his father, Tom Luckey, suffered a paralyzing accident in 2005, Spencer took over the family business, introducing digital design and fabrication techniques to expand its reach. Under his leadership, Luckey Climbers has constructed over 80 unique structures worldwide, from museums and malls to cruise ships, each designed to inspire creativity and social interaction among children. Spencer's work emphasizes the adaptability of human spaces and the importance of imaginative play in public environments. Thank you for being on with us, Spencer. It's good to see you. How are you?
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is really quite a treat.
Excellent. Yeah, well, it's really it's this. Can't wait to hear more about designing for children and play and fun. Today's podcast is sponsored by Scantaplan. Scantaplan transforms how existing buildings are documented by combining precision reality capture with architecture-led intelligence. Specializing in adaptive reuse and renovation workflows, we deliver highly accurate BIM models and 2D, 3D deliverables that bridge site conditions and design intent. Reach out to scantaplan.io. So, Spencer, you are doing work all over the world. I've seen the Luckey Climbers a lot. I guess the one I've seen the most is at the Boston Children's Museum, which I guess is one of the originals, right? Or it's sort
of. That's a replacement for the replacement that replaced the original. If that makes any sense.
Sort of I think I might have seen the original when I was a kid, though. You know,
it's the third climber that was there. The first climber that was there was actually the very first Luckey climber. That's where my old man got his start, and then when that got loved to death, it got replaced by the maintenance man there, who made something that kids liked but didn't love. It was it was made out of recycled plastic. It sort of had a sort of battleship gray aspect to it. And then they hired my old man to come back and build another one.
Wow. So just so our audience can visualize what we're talking about here, I've heard it described as a Calder-mobile fashioned from Monet's lily pads.
Yeah, my old man did say that he wanted
to giant scale. It's a giant. What's that?
Kahuli did with glass.
I don't know if it's really a kahuli, but I mean, it's a giant. It's a giant play structure where you can climb around. A lot of these are really quite enormous. They're like multiple stories of climbing, and actually Spencer said his dad referred to it as a fountain of kids, just going up and down and streaming all over the place as they're climbing through this thing. So it's it's kid architecture, it's architecture for play, and it's actually, I think, been pretty influential. I mean, I've been seeing these things all my life, and they're pretty amazing. I think I'm too big to really climb around in one of those things, though.
Well, I don't know. Do you have grandkids?
No. I have kids.
I very rarely see parents in the climbers. I think that they're sort of happy to have their kid off doing things, but grandparents is a whole.
Yes, yeah.
They get right in there. It's kind
right.
Of hilarious how it skips a generation.
Well, I always used to love things like that because it's true. You get like a free half hour of downtime.
I have friends that complain that their kids spend 2 hours in some of my projects.
Well, that would have been amazing for me at a certain age to have 2 hours.
Right.
2 hours of free time. But then then it's all over, and they don't want to spend any time with you. So
my kid's 18. Yeah, it's just I'm lucky if I can get him on the phone.
Yeah. So let's go back, if you don't mind. you know, you're an architect. You study at Yale, and your father was also a Yale architect. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering about your. I'm interested in hearing about your architecture work before you took over the business, and what your dad's work was like too, because it sounded like that was pretty psychedelic for architecture.
Yeah, I mean, most of the architecture I did was actually just in school, you know. And then I don't know, I kind of made some computer models for people during the summers, and did, you know, worked in offices, things like that. And right before I came back to the family business, I worked with this woman here in New Haven named Laura Peary now. And it was wonderful. She was like this just amazing boss. She'd worked for Caesar Pelli a bunch. And I had really I'd worked in the restaurant business a bunch, and for, you know, smaller firms and for other types of people, but I'd never worked for somebody who was so empowering and had this real kind of very high expectations, but also you know, about accountability and stuff like that. And really, she really gave me a lot of responsibility, and I just loved it. I thought it was what a wonderful way to be. I mean, it wasn't like a lot of the other kinds of businesses I'd worked in. She was unlike any other boss. And so, you know, often when I think about, you know, how I should relate to other people that I work with, I think about Laura's model. And I know that's sort of beside the point.
What do you think were her principles? If you could boil it down to a nutshell, what were her principles?
You know, she would just give me responsibilities and then make me accountable.
Yeah.
And you know, I screwed up just as much as anybody, but it felt good. You know, it was like and she, you know, she listened to my solutions and my narratives, and it was sort of surprising. You know, I'd worked for a lot of people, again, that would kind of micromanage, or not necessarily in the architecture context, but you know, when you work in a restaurant, some fancy restaurants, you know, they get on you about stains on your shirt, and you know, there's this whole sort of pettiness.
Sure. Yeah.
That, you know,
well, yeah, I find for me, when I'm managing people, I really need to identify what is my definition of success very clearly, right? What does it mean to succeed? And if I know that, I could tell them, okay, success for me is you deliver this on Wednesday, and then as long as they know that, I don't really have to micromanage them because I'm getting what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know. But a lot of people don't know what that is. They can't actually identify what they want. And then
I just loved it. I mean, she'd hired me as a designer, and I was designing things, and I just thought it was fun. I don't know. I've always loved, you know, puzzles, and that's kind of what made architecture attractive to me in a way, was that it had a lot of kind of, you know, hands-on sort of problem solving, and then aesthetics. So it's, you know, and the ideas, the interface between ideas and stuff and all of that, it made sense to me. You know, other forms of school were kind of, I don't know, I could put it simply, sort of lost on me. I mean, there are some things like physics and geometry kind of made some sense to me, but you know, I have no innate understanding of French, so it was all fresh and new to me in a lot of ways. And a lot of school was like that. And but I don't know, architecture school was just fun. It was like kindergarten for adults.
Yeah.
And particularly at Yale, it was just so, the culture there was so sort of talent rich and exciting. And they would, you know, I just loved it. They would give us all these, you know, you'd have 50 people sort of chewing away at the same assignment, and then 50 different solutions. And it was, I don't know, it was just glorious and hilarious. So a big beehive.
Yeah. Well, so, but so I just imagine your whole life you've been surrounded by these lucky climbers, right? And did you work with your dad when you when you were growing up and like during college, or?
I did, and I took this test when I was about 15. This uncle of mine paid for this test, and I say this because it's called the Johnson-O'Connor aptitude test, and it told me that I should become an architect. But my sister went to art school, and my old man, as we were just talking about, was an architect and considered himself to be an artist. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being compared to them, and so I resisted going to architecture school entirely because, or having really any kind of career, to be perfectly honest. That's how I ended up working in restaurants and stuff like that. But what was your question?
Just about working with the Lucky Climbers.
Yeah.
Was it
my
always
old man really didn't want me to work for him. He it was kind of like this thing that I did when I couldn't find other kinds of work.
Yeah.
And he, unlike my boss, Laura Peary, he never delegated to me. He always delegated to somebody else. And I was sort of like the last person he would entrust with anything. But, there came a time when I was, multiple times when I was sort of critical to the, success or failure of his little business. And he hated it and I hated it. And it was awful. I mean, we had this kind of fantasy company called the Arguing Men.
Yeah.
We would just fight about anything.
Right.
And then when we got bored of fighting each other, we would start, bagging on the coworkers. I don't know. It was kind of unpleasant to be around, unpleasant to watch, unpleasant to participate in.
Yeah.
But, we eventually, after we started to work together, after his accident, developed a sort of, some basic rules of the road, and, I don't know, kind of worked it out. Basically, it meant that, I had to hire somebody, or we hired somebody to work directly with him. But it was, it was a strange time for him, obviously, being so severely handicapped, that it's a very precarious health situation just generally. And he spent a lot of time sort of in and out of the hospital. So I gave him the first couple of swings at the plate, but I always had a little thing that I was working on in the background that he maybe didn't know about, because I just I had to guarantee success.
Yeah.
I had to provide a backstop to the whole situation.
Well, I mean, what you did with the company was kind of, from what I can tell, kind of like a classic sort of generational analog to digital shift in some ways, right? Because you brought you brought in a bunch of new digital tools and new ways of doing, based around all the principles that your father invented or discovered, or
Yeah, and to his credit, he really embraced it. It was like he used to have this very sort of I don't know, kind of 19th century process. He would do little drawings, doodles, and then he'd make a model and mail the model off to the client. And if the client liked it, they'd mail it back. And then, we would take it apart in this very specific way to figure out, what all the shapes were. And we had these ways of translating everything, but it was very much sort of like, again, like 19th century boat building. And, and the computer really, expanded the palette and the scale. We could make bigger, more complicated things. And, all of it was sort of revolutionary at the time, but, and it's cool because, in a way I sort of went to school to do this. I mean, I did explicitly go to school to do this, but, model making, they had really strict requirements about, you could never show up at a review without a model. So, everyone became ace model makers. And it just developed a lot of confidence in, my facilities and my problem solving when it came to, you know, strange conditions. And there was this
Talking about physical model, having a physical model.
physical model.
Yeah.
But then you also had to represent the physical model, you know, as drawings and everything. So there was a lot of sort of like sort of medium translation. You know, take a, you know, a crumpled up piece of paper and somehow figure out how to turn it into a computer model, and then turn that back into drawings, and then turn that in, you know, it's a lot of that kind of stuff. And those sort of skills and facilities and sort of confidence building, problem solving things that we did in school really helped out a lot in the real world, because the second commission that we got was the Boston Children's Museum, and it was too big to fit in the shop that I'd rented, and we couldn't mock it up, which was the way that we usually did things. So there was this funny little tool on at the architecture school that, you know, nobody really ever used, and I just thought to myself, wow, because I'd seen a demonstration of it and I thought it was really neat, but it was for taking, you know, so you, again, like the crumpled up piece of paper or whatever it was, and you could digitize it. You could put this sort of, make this little point cloud. It was this little stylus on the end of an arm. And I thought, wow, you know, what if we made the reality match the computer model and use that as the translation to go from the computer model to reality?
Yeah.
And so then we made very detailed computer models that had all of these, you know, little things and instances in them. And then we, you know, we could very easily translate that back into, you know, into reality. So then we could have the geometry, this sort of odd geometry, just sort of appear magically, and then everything just fit together kind of like a miracle, like you'd expect.
So has that become some kind of like procedural type design where you give it the constraints and then it shows you what you can do, or is it all, are you still designing it all?
We still design it all. I haven't, I don't know. There was a guy here that got really into Grasshopper, and which is a plugin for Rhino.
Yeah, parametric design. Yeah.
Yeah, and and figured out a lot of that kind of stuff. But I don't know. It always required such an I don't know. I always have to go back, and I always had to go back and spend the same amount of time fine tuning it as I would.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
are you still working with a physical model? Do you still make physical models?
No, no more physical models. We haven't made a physical model here since, I don't know, I guess maybe the last one was probably Houston or something like that. I don't know.
Do you ever find things like that helpful for brainstorming, like working with
when
you're thinking about a new design?
They're great sales tools, I think, and you know, it helps people really inhabit the space and understand what you're talking about. It, you know, computer models are, it always becomes a problem of representation, and you know, people don't necessarily appreciate all the things that you've thought about and you know, and have represented in a computer model. And physical models have a very, you know, they're really accessible. And you know, people can kind of have their own vantage on things, which I think really helps. But you know, you just have to be creative about the way that you sort of arrange the renderings and what kind of drawings you do. You have to be, I just find that being more tactical is what helps.
How do you bring people into the digital model before you start fabricating? Do you guys use VR or any other thing like that to kind of help them see it?
No, but once I try to show them what I'm looking at, because I don't, you know, early on in the process, you know, if you show people really slick, fancy renderings, they sometimes have this kind of like revulsion to it, or they think that it's definitive in some way or something like that. But what I really want is to have a conversation about, you know, ideas and things, and what ideas look like as things, and you know, that more abstract conversation. And so I often just do like screen captures, and because it's like literally what I've been looking at, and it has a real it's got, I put little scale figures in there, and everyone can see what it looks like for people.
Sure.
And all that. And and I find that that's nice because it's often a very good tactic, because people don't think that I've spent a whole lot of time on it, so they're much more likely to be really
genuine,
genuine and honest.
Yeah.
And which is what I want. I don't want to stuff anything down somebody's throat that they aren't interested in. And but yeah, I mean, and then sometimes if I can get them on a Zoom call or something, I'll show them, sort of all the iterations. Often I do, I don't really know, like I'll do it for days. So just make little version after version after version after version. And that's
with something like this, like how do you step back and know that it's done, that it's working or whatever? I mean, what kind of criteria would you use? It seems like it's hard to know when it's finished, right? Or I don't know.
Well, I've always thought deadlines are incredibly creative.
Of course.
They're really good at sort of forcing all those things to the fore. But I really just try to be honest about what makes me happy. I can't really have no other criteria, that
sure.
As an artist, it's to try to sort of tailor it to somebody else's tastes or something. I don't know. Humans are really great at sort of identifying fakes, frauds, and all of that, inauthenticity.
Yeah.
And, so I try to be as honest as I can throughout the design process. It's why I make lots of little versions of things in the computer, and I'm sort of obsessed with geometry and stuff like that, and I try to make little games out of it, and I don't know, do all the things.
I mean, it's a very kind of unique space, as it were, because you can look at it as an environment, or you can look at it as an object or a sculpture or a piece of design. It's a unique form of space. I mean,
yeah, it is. I generally think like in terms of I don't know, like jewelry or something, or like a brooch, some kind of things, all those kinds of things, because and most
have you ever thought about that, miniaturizing your designs and turning them into jewelry?
I have thought about it, but I haven't done it. I'd love to do that. Snow globes. I want to make snow globes with little lucky climbers in them.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
But yeah, so I sort of design objects. I mean, in the computer, I often just draw like, lines in three-dimensional space. And I have a kind of a palette of things that I work with. There's straight lines, there's straight up planar curves, and then there's helixes. And those are sort of like the grades of complexity.
Right.
And the reason for, straight curves or planar curves they're easier to fabricate, and they become in very predictable shapes. And straight lines obviously are kind of if I can make something expressive with straight lines, I generally try to do that, because it, if it satisfies the requirements or whatever, because I think that it has, I don't know, as a somebody that was trained as an architect, I'm always sort of like looking for prototypes. I'm sort of, architecture sort of has this obsession with prototyping and, coming up with sort of the ultimate solution. I don't know that I've ever even come close to that, but it's sort of sitting in the back of my head at all times. Like, what does this want to be? What does this need to be? What is it going to be? What are people in 10 years maybe going to think of something like this? What is it?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then Helix is the only reason why I use Helix is because it's the most complicated shape they can make with a bender in one single shot, because they they develop these tools to make stair stringers.
So I mean, just to give people some idea about some of these larger climbers that you have, like the Infinity Climber. I mean, there are multiple stories, right? Can you explain the scale of how these work and how they kind of interface with architecture?
Yeah, well, I mean, scale is a funny thing. Again, I design almost entirely in the computer or like a sketch pad, and I'm always blown away. We make them here, and I don't know, human experience, even we often assemble them here on their side, and then they get tipped up in the field, and I'm always like, my God, that thing's like twice as big as I thought it was. It's
really,
It's something strange that happens between turning something from horizontal to vertical that I have yet to, in spite of all the years of doing this, have really yet to fully comprehend.
But you always know, I mean, how big it's going to be before it gets installed, don't you? Or you?
Of course, like down to the 1/4 inch, or 1/8 inch. But it's intellectually is one thing, experientially is completely another. It just is, I don't know. I sit in my little office and I design things, and then they get made, and I'm always like, my God, like that's just.
But anyway, just to get the audience to understand, just so they can try to visualize the scale of some of this work, like. I don't know. You said you're putting something. You're doing stuff in Shanghai. You've got stuff all over the world that you're installing, and
18 countries.
18 countries, right? And I think a lot of this stuff is quite epic, right? It's like multiple stories of climbing and huge climbing environments, right?
Yeah, we have one in South Korea that's 54 feet tall.
Right.
There's one. I guess the one in Boston's about 35 feet tall. There's one in Virginia that's maybe, I think it's about 44 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah, some of them are quite large. Yeah, but we also have shoehorned them into like 10-foot tall spaces and stuff like that. Have on funny little elevators, and I don't know. It's a lot of it.
Do you think about like obviously you think about the experience of going through it, but I mean, is there like some kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, narrative or motion thing about how the movement progresses, or I don't know. It's you're modeling for movement, right? So
yeah, there's I don't know, my sort of philosophy about that has changed over the years. It's a project like the one that we did at the Liberty Science Center was, it's sort of like the most high concept piece we've ever done. And it was based on the idea of relativism. I had this friend, Erwin Auer, who taught here at Yale as a drawing teacher and sculptor, and he was obsessed with the suture curve, the stitches on a baseball.
Yeah.
And the thing he loved about it, he loved to draw two-dimensional versions of the suture curve, so he could get all of these different shapes out of this one shape, as he sort of turned it in his mind and then drew it on the page. And so I took that to mean it's sort of like relativism, where what you see is a function of where you sit. And so that was, my first few proposals that I gave to them were kind of like my rationale was, this is the latest, greatest Luckey climber. They didn't even want it to be in that atrium. They wanted the climber to be in this little room off to the side. And I kept being like, no, we're going to put it up in there. It's going to be really great. And then eventually they just said, look, Spencer, these are all funny and cool looking, whatever, but we can't just sell like the idea that this is just the latest, greatest Luckey climber. Like, nobody knows what that is and nobody cares. Like, it has to have some kind of sort of science aspect to it. And so that's when I thought about Erwin's obsession with the suture curve. And so that, it was obviously, they latched onto it immediately. And I knew I had them when they were like, oh, so you just step over the edge. These are like, you know, New Yorkers. They love that kind of thing. And, you just step over the edge to get into it. And then they said, so what does your engineer think about this? And I said, oh, he loves it. You know, see, look, it's just a big box truss. And they went, oh, yeah. And then I told the engineer, I said, you know, so, hey, look, we're going to make this thing. And he was like, you told them what? You told them. So I had to lie to kind of everyone about that.
Wow. Has there ever been something like that where you had a great idea and then you just found that it was like this, it wasn't feasible for safety or zoning or some other reason like that?
I don't know. Sometimes like the fire chief gets involved and there's like some aspect that, you know, we need to change some of the finishes or something like that. But I don't know. I'm kind of a bit of a Vulcan, and so I don't ever show anything to my engineer that I know isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's my job.
Do you feel like there's some kind of modeling question you're still trying to solve, like some kind of I don't know, design model that is still like out of reach for you?
I don't know. It's like anything. I'd love to be able to it's about speed, you know, like how can I just sort of think it? It's always the thing, because you know, drawing is so fast and easy in a way, except I'm not very good at it. So but I would love it if the computer would have that same sort of immediacy. And so I'm always trying to develop little tricks in the computer that you know, little, you know, so I sort of stay up on the new commands and all that kind of stuff. But I have a pretty refined little way of doing things. And like I
was talking yesterday about, you know, I think the dilemma that a lot of us are going to face as artists, designers, is that you're going to be at a point where you can just throw every single Lucky Climber that you or your father ever designed into a big AI, and then it'll be able to output, you know, Lucky Climbers that look in some ways like more true to your design style than even you are yourself, right? And then everyone is going to sort of have the option. Can they just push the easy button, or do they continue designing? You know, because
well, so it's a paradigm shift, and it's not unlike the paradigm shift between you know, what 19th century modalities, you know, drawing and model making, to computer modeling and a sort of more iterative process. And, you know, in the future there'll be AI and or maybe we're there already. And the thing that's the same about all of those is that you still have to say yes and no. Like, humans are still going to evaluate these things. And I don't know, I feel like if when I'm at my sort of at my most optimal as a computer modeler and designer, that's all I'm doing anyway, is just saying yes and no. And I don't have, like, you know, my ego isn't super attached to things. And so in a lot of ways, it just gives you more immediacy. And then the you know, the you still have to just make the value decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that makes any sense, but it may happen a lot faster, and it may happen with a lot less blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
And it may come up with better ideas.
Well, I mean, I just it's crazy how fast. I mean, I don't know. It does seem like I've spoken to a number of architects now that they feel like they can basically just like turn their whole design sensibility into a formula where you just push a button and it spits out another. I mean, I would imagine something like that with the climbers would be one of the more easy things to do because they all have a basic certain logic and framing.
Yeah.
And stuff, you know?
I don't know.
But,
Well, I take my iconoclastic tendencies seriously, and
yeah,
and I really take the I don't know. I try to sort of constantly out weird myself. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
well, I mean, how are you going to turn it up? What do you think is going to get more crazy and weird and fun about the climbers in the next 10 years?
well, so we're there.
Yeah.
We're coming out with a climber. It's going to open in a few weeks. It's down in Carmel, Indiana, that has these really amazing dynamic lights. That
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the whole climber is going to just turn into this gigantic, ridiculous light feature. We've already made a few that have lights inside of them, but these are there's 2 addressable LED strips within each platform, so that you can really get a whole slew of crazy sort of graphics going on inside.
Interactive? Did the kids interact with the lights, or?
That's what's coming next. Is that I mean, that already has a capacity for the kids to operate the lights from a kiosk, which I think is going to be really interesting, because I think it'll expand the sort of age range of kids that are interested in using the climbers. And then I want to fill them with triggers and switches and stuff, so that it can get kind of gamified, and maybe there's lots of sort of ways it can be turned into a musical instrument and stuff like that. And so then it can have this much broader, getting back to your sort of object or environment observation, environment kind of vibe to it. I think, to make it very immersive and interactive and engaging, I think will be really great, because a lot of the things, one of the things that I think makes a Luckey climber work is that kids have their own agency, and agency over a number of different things. They can go where they want to go, like adults are at a huge disadvantage in that environment, but they can also kind of think the way they want to think. I way prefer the climbers that are sort of non-referential or abstract, because I feel like there's so much playground equipment that's for whatever reason well-intentioned, but there's no reason for a piece of playground equipment to look like a pirate ship. I mean, the real reason it looks like a pirate ship is probably because a couple of adults got together and had to talk about something and had to start from somewhere, and that's what they did. It makes sense to them at the time, but I don't know that it makes sense to little kids. I think little kids would love to, this guy the other day told me about this fire engine that they had at this playground when he was growing up, and the kids just loved the fire engine. It was a real fire engine, and it had all the sort of sharps taken off of it, but everything else about it was completely authentic, and they loved suspending disbelief about whether or not this thing was a fire engine. I've never to this day seen any kid on a big fake fire engine that were playing like they were in a fire or something. It's just not that. They have to suspend disbelief and go through this whole mental process. And I think if kids reach a certain age when they sort of identify all of this simulacrum and think that it's not, it's going to impede on their mission, which is, I think every kid is just trying to get more rights, like that, they want to be able to tie their own shoes and cross the road, and pour their own milk and all that kind of stuff. And, they reach a certain age and they're super aware of this kind of thing. And then they don't want to go in the thing that's coded to, as greasy kid stuff. And so what I hope is that by designing things that are sort of more aesthetically sophisticated, kids will, just feel engaged in it regardless, and won't really necessarily care about what other people think of them or in that context, because it doesn't have like a kind of a greasy kid stuff sort of
Oh, I
cotton.
love the idea of the disco version with light and sound, and it's kind of like, they have at the bowling alley, they have it on the weekends and they turn the black lights on and the disco ball and everything. I can imagine that kind of version of the Lucky Climbers where it's like, we used to actually work oh yeah. Oh wow, that's incredible. Man, that's so amazing. Wow.
This is the rave version.
So they have these sort of Tron-like chaser lights that are spinning around each of these lily pads.
Here's the Americana.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. Oh man, I can't wait to see this.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Are those just renderings, or is it
no, that's a mock-up that we have here in the shop.
Oh man. Wow. I can't wait to see that. That's amazing, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Wow. Wow, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through sort of like a bunch of metamorphoses, and I guess when I first got involved with my old man, it was it had a certain he was always sort of starting like he's trained as an architect, is obsessed with prototypes, and so a lot of his freestanding things were just tripods, and then we kind of mushed those around and started adding like curvy pipes and other kinds of expressive things, and now here we are. We've got this whole, other vibe to it. It's, I don't know. It's good. Try to think about what it's going to be like in 10 years.
So for someone who, has the fortune of being a kid architect, what can you share? What's something from the world of kid architecture that all architects should know?
I don't know. I always have this sort of internal debate with myself about practicality and efficiency and human experience. And I just think it's important to remind oneself that there was this time when I was really despondent in architecture school. And so I called my father and I sort of mused about dropping out and stuff like that, and he said, no, you're just tired, and you just always got to remember, architects make wonderful things. Some architects make wonderful things, and so I try to remember that architecture, in spite of all of its conservatism, and not in like the political sense, but conservative in it's such a huge investment, architecture, that people need to sort of have it grounded in some kind of it's like Vitruvius, firmness, commodity, and delight. It has to sort of check off all the boxes in order for people to really think that it's a worthwhile investment. And and so I don't know, I'm a romantic, and so I try to my main, and this doesn't answer your question at all, but I'm always just trying to design things that I think will help people feel better about themselves or good about themselves.
Yeah.
And I try not to make lots of strange, esoteric, hidden meanings that result in sort of ugly resolutions. And I'm very upfront about all of that kind of stuff, because I want people to like it for the same reasons that I like things. When I say I design like little objects, I spin them around in the computer and I see how the lines made up with each other and do all of those things. And I make sure that I really genuinely am pleased by it. And I know that's kind of a strange criteria, but it's all I have to go on. And so, sometimes I look at buildings and I think, nobody really got a big kick out of designing that, and it's But you see that in everything. There's really ugly, funny looking cars, and there's funny looking this, that, and the others. And it's I don't know. It's hard for me to I mean, what I do is so profoundly different.
People have all different priorities. I spoke to somebody yesterday. Her entire priority is about building safes and keeping people protected, and having places to put things like weapons and uranium and things like that, right? So it's like completely opposite priority from like what you're thinking about, which is play and joy and spontaneity and agency and all these things, So I mean, but it's true. I mean, everyone kind of looks at the world through a different lens, and it certainly shows up in their work.
I mean, in the most abstract sense, she's designing things that make all the rest of this possible, right? I don't know.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing, is that the field serves really every aspect of human existence, so. But you're hanging out with some of the more fun people. So
yeah, well, I mean, my father, he was designing stuff for people, for his, he had these classmates from architecture school that would, get him commissions for staircases and other things, these weird cylindrical rooms and whatnot. And he, at a certain point, just decided that, or figured out rather, that that adults weren't really, as receptive to his goofy ideas. So he just trained his interests on kids.
Yeah.
I think because he just thought that they would be a little bit, more receptive.
Sure.
No adult in their right mind would. Adults don't really like lucky climbers very much. I mean, they like to look at them.
Yeah.
But and that's kind of, again, that's the sort of accessibility piece. If it can be sort of intriguing to look at, then it'll, take purchase in public places where playground equipment usually isn't found. And, at the end of the day, I'm mostly interested in placemaking and, and how the public, enjoys public space.
Sure. Well, anyway, really taking off in a big way. Looks like you've got quite a niche there, and it seems like people are really getting a lot more into these lucky climbers all over the world now. So
we'll see.
Be happy. Listen, Spencer, I'd love to help you in any way we can. If we can help you to, expedite your process and create digital twins of spaces for you, so you can just design. A few times that we've used that kind of a service, it's just been amazing. I love it. It's the coolest. But we can model any museum, lobby, whatever space you need, and then you basically start from that, and then you're going to have that, 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch accuracy, guaranteed. It's such a big deal. It's such a big deal. Well, that's great. Well, let's talk some other time about that. Looking forward to catching up with you soon, Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hey, thank you so much for putting me on. It's really a huge honor. Thank you. It's really cool to hear about your process, and thanks for sharing with us. Once again, Practice Forward Podcast. Thanks again. This is Owen Bush signing off, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.